Okay, so imagine this. You've been waiting for something for 38 years. You're stuck, you're suffering, and you're just waiting for a miracle. Well, this is exactly where we find a man in the biblical story of the Pool of Bethesda. He's been lying on his mat for nearly 4 decades. And then, Jesus approaches him and asks what seems like, honestly, the most obvious question in the world. Wilt thou be made whole? Or, in other words, do you want to be healed? It's a simple yes or no question, right? But the truly shocking realization here is that the man actually doesn't say yes.
Yeah, instead of answering the direct question about his own healing, he replies with this, "Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool." Jesus asked him about his future, about possibility, and about healing. But the man, he answered with his past. He focused on his obstacles, giving this excuse-laden explanation. You see, for 38 years, he had developed a perfectly rehearsed reason for exactly why he couldn't move.
Welcome to today's Explainer. Together, we're going to unpack some absolutely life-changing principles from Celio Amalia's powerful book, Breaking the Cycle, From Blame to Responsibility. Throughout this Explainer, we're going to explore how we, so often mirror that man at the pool. We get really comfortable with explaining our circumstances rather than actually changing them. So, we're going to talk about how to shift completely from being passive victims to becoming active, empowered spiritual stewards.
Okay, let's dive into the roadmap for today. First, confronting your mat. Second, the 3 delaying excuses. Third, the seed of blame. Fourth, from victim to steward. And finally, rise, take up, and walk. Let's get right to it.
So, part 1, confronting your mat.
The very first thing we need to do is identify exactly what it is we've been lying on. Because let's face it, your mat might not be a physical one. It might be dead. It could be fear, rejection, comparison, disappointment, regret, or even blame. A mat is basically a temporary condition that, over time, we mistakenly adopt as our actual identity. We become so incredibly accustomed to our struggle that we kind of build our home right inside of it. But here is the absolutely crucial point. You literally cannot rise from something you refuse to acknowledge. You have to recognize what's been keeping you stuck before you can ever step off it. Moving on to part 2, the 3 delaying excuses. Now that we've identified the mat, we enter what we can call the deconstruction phase. First up is the blame excuse. This is basically the narrative that connects your current situation directly to someone else's past actions. In the book, Amalia shares this deeply personal story about how she blamed her children's father for her financial struggles. Now, her explanation was totally true, but it wasn't helping her move forward at all. It just kept her looking backward. Contrast this with the biblical story of Joseph. He was sold into slavery by his own brothers. He had every reason in the world to live in blame. But while he absolutely acknowledged their evil actions, he refused to let them define his narrative. He chose instead to focus entirely on God's future purpose for his life. Next up, the second defense mechanism is the "I'm doing my best" excuse. This one is super tricky because, well, it sounds so valid. But in reality, it's a very comfortable hiding place. It actually breeds passivity because it stops us from asking the really difficult questions about the gifts and opportunities we've been neglecting. Think about the servant in the parable of the talents who buried his gift just to keep it safe. Or think about God asking Moses to stop worrying about his lack of eloquence and simply use the ordinary staff that was already in his hand. Sometimes, telling ourselves we're doing our best is really just an excuse to ignore the resources we already have available to us.
And finally, we have the better than me excuse. This one is a severe inward attack on your identity, and it's totally driven by comparison. It's that little voice whispering that you aren't qualified or experienced enough. Gideon felt this exact same self-doubt when he told God his family was poor, and he was the least in his entire house. But Amalia makes such a brilliant point here. Absolutely no one is better at your unique, God-given assignment than you are. Sure, other people might be better at their assignment, but they cannot bring your specific, unique combination of gifts, lessons, and experiences into the world. Remember, God doesn't do duplicates.
Which brings us to part 3, the seed of blame.
Let's look at how these excuses actually build into something much deeper. You can think of thoughts and excuses as essentially being seeds. Amalia realized that every single time she replayed the story of her financial hardship, she wasn't just stating facts, she was actively watering a seed of blame. And the thing about the law of seed time and harvest is, if you continually water the story of an offense, you're going to harvest exactly what you plant: delay, fear, and discouragement. The harvest always reveals the seed. Simply put, the story you constantly rehearse becomes the reality you actually experience.
So a crucial thing to understand here is that excuses don't just keep us stuck, they create literal blindness. Look at this verse from Genesis about Hagar in the wilderness. She honestly thought she and her son were going to die of thirst out there. But notice what the text says. God opened her eyes, and she saw a well. God didn't miraculously create a brand new well in that exact moment. The provision was actually already there. He simply removed her blindfold so she could see it. It makes you wonder, how many opportunities, ideas, or answers have you completely missed out on just because your excuses kept your attention locked onto your limitations?
Let's jump into part 4, from victim to steward.
Now, this right here is the massive paradigm shift of our whole explainer today. We are talking about moving from a mindset of absolute powerlessness to one of divine responsibility. Look at this contrast. A victim focuses on the wound, a steward focuses on the assignment. A victim looks backward, a steward moves forward. And here is probably the most powerful distinction of all. Victimhood is like continually placing your future on the altar of yesterday's pain. You are actively sacrificing what's next to what has already happened. Stewardship, on the other hand, asks you to get off that altar and start working with whatever God has already entrusted into your hands.
I just absolutely love how this quote captures the essence of that shift. Responsibility is not accepting blame for someone else's actions. Responsibility is accepting ownership of your response. If you really break down the word, it literally means response plus ability. Listen, life happens to all of us. Unexpected setbacks are a given, but our true power lies entirely in how we choose to respond to those things. We can't control the past, for sure, but we are fully responsible for the present.
Finally, part 5, rise, take up, and walk.
All right, it's time for the ultimate action plan. We're going right back to the Pool of Bethesda to look at the 3 specific commands Jesus gave the man there. Step 1 is rise. This means fundamentally changing your posture and mindset. You have to get up and leave that mental position of blame behind. Step 2 is take up your mat. Notice Jesus didn't tell him to just throw them out away. He told him to carry it. The very thing that once represented his greatest weakness would now become the physical evidence of his transformation. Carry your testimony. Don't let your history carry you. And then step 3, walk. Take action and move forward in faith. Transformation, guys, always requires movement.
And this brings us to a really crucial realization. Explanations alone do not create progress. It doesn't matter how valid your reasons are or how perfectly you can explain exactly why you are stuck. An explanation is not going to move you a single inch. Faith requires action. It requires stepping forward into obedience even before the entire path is visible to you. Ultimately, movement is what changes where we are going.
Which leaves us with one final, very important question to think about. What excuse are you leaving behind today? Is it blame? Is it the feeling that someone else out there is just better than you? Or is it that comfortable illusion that you're already doing your absolute best? I want to challenge you today to stop explaining and start stepping into your God-given stewardship. Rise, take up your mat, and walk. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this completely changes how you view the obstacles in your life. Keep learning, keep moving, and I'll catch you next time.